Our next guest runs Vietnam's largest fund manager. He's Don Lam. He's Vina Capital's CEO, and he is in Ho Chi Minh City, or Saigon. Don, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Well, why suddenly the rush back into Vietnam? Many people have had their fingers burnt.
Well, first, good morning from sunny Saigon. And the last, I guess, 12 months or so, money is coming back. I think that's mainly because the macroeconomic situation is getting better. There's 5 things I think that are affecting the whole area. First, since 2011, the government actually done some reform program, and this reform actually coming to effect now. The GDP have been pretty stable at about 5 to 6% growth per year. 2 is inflation. You know, at the peak, Vietnam inflation is about 23% in 2011. Today is about 5%. So that's under control. 3, recently, Moody actually upgrade Vietnam's sovereign rating with a positive outlook from a B2 to a B1. I mean, that's really a big thing for Vietnam. That's the first time we actually have an upgrade in 9 years. 3, I think a lot of the manufacturing or external factors has been good to Vietnam. We have actually moved more toward value-added manufacturing instead of government and textile. We're now pretty big in electronic. You know, Samsung, for example, producing over 40% of the smartphone now in Vietnam, for example. And I think lastly, it's about valuation. The equity market in Vietnam is still pretty cheap. We are now about 20 to 30% cheaper than the regional peers. On a 2014 PE basis, we were at 13 to 14 times. So those are really the 5 factors that bringing investors back into the Vietnam market.
Don, the thing is, you know, we've already seen, I think the benchmark's up 20% so far year to date. You know, will some actually be concerned that perhaps they've missed the boat?
Well, I mean, for us, we still think that there's still a bit more to go, mainly because the overall macroeconomic situation has been pretty good. And I think over time, the market have a bit more room. Like I said, we are still about 20 to 30% below regional peers. So I'm not too worried about the recent run up by 20% or so.
You mentioned, you know, what Vietnam was doing in terms of being able to build goods cheaply, and you know, I think you alluded to going up the value chain here as well. But isn't there not an over-reliance on China, even though there is the parts of the ruling party at the moment which are saying that perhaps we need to be more open and need to get over that reliance?
Yes, it is, because you know, globally today, everyone is actually is a global supply chain. Even though we're producing smartphone today, some of the parts are coming from China. So we are relying on China from some of the parts. But you know, people like Samsung and Intel and those people, they are moving even the part manufacturing or the supply chain to Vietnam. So eventually, because Vietnam labor costs about 1/3 of China, those will come to Vietnam anyway. So it's just taking time.
Okay, well, what about these geopolitical tensions, of course, and we saw what happened with this oil rig imbroglio that we saw a few months ago right now. That probably is also something that people are wary of, are they not?
Yes, they definitely are. And, you know, when this thing blew up in early May, I actually came out and said, look, Vina Capital is buying because the geopolitical risk will always be there. But I think it's a short-term issue. We actually done a lot of purchase or buying at that time. In fact, the index, the Vietnam index today, is already past the lowest point when the oil rig actually moved in East Sea. And so I think for those who are more mid to long-term view, looking at Vietnam, then fundamentally we're very strong. So those short-term issues that came up, I think it's a buying opportunity for us.
Okay, but there are a lot of unresolved issues. There are a lot of people concerned about the banking system, non-performing loans, that sort of thing as well. You know, how far do those problems still remain?
Well, you know, the two key issues that we all worry the most is really the NPL in the banking system and the SOE reform. Now, the NPL in the banking system, the government have moved a long way toward trying to resolve it by setting up a company called Vietnam Asset Management Company. Essentially, it's a bad debt company. They are buying the bad debt from the banks and then selling to the auction market. one of the great news recently was the government now looking at allowing foreign investor to buy these bad debt, which they don't have before. So that really opened up for another opportunity for investors actually buying this bad debt and working through something similar to a lot of people make a lot of money during the Asian financial crisis. So they're doing something about it. Two, on the SOE reform, the Prime Minister actually came out and said, look, we're committed to do 423 company privatized in the next 2 years. And these are big blue chips company. The one, things like the Mobifone, which is the second largest mobile phone company in Vietnam, Vietnam Airlines, or the national government company called Vinatex. These are big blue chips company being reformed. So I think we move in the right direction a bit slowly. It takes a bit of time, but it's moving.
Don, great talking to you, and good luck. Don Lam there from Vina Capital joining us there from Ho Chi Minh City.